Author's note. Hey everybody, thanks for all the good feedback on my last story, Stranded in the Upper Atmosphere with William H. Macy. Glad you liked it. This is a story I've been working on for a few months, so there are a few things I had to rewrite because of things in the news, but hope you like it too! Sealed Under an Ancient Egyptian Pyramid with Willem Dafoe by Scribe of Dreams. It was February of 2020. Just before everything shut down. Tom Hanks was in good health, the NHL was still playing, and I was in Egypt, scouting out locations. Egypt is a big country. A lot of people live there, and a lot of people who don't live there are there at any given moment. Or were at the time anyway. The point is, we didn't have the budget to make the pyramids look as remote and undisturbed as they do in most movies. Derek, our producer, had signed me up for a tour of one of the lesser-known pyramids, where the pharaoh Tat-Kera II was buried. We knew right away that we couldn't afford the rights to shoot under the big three, the ones at Giza. Establishing shot of the pyramid of Tat-Kera II. It's not in the best state, crumbling, no longer pointy at the top. A small tour group, myself included, lines up outside, just as another group exits. "Tour Group B with me, please," said a blonde American woman in a tacky tour guide's uniform. I followed her, my Tour Group B ticket, around my neck on a blue lanyard, hanging next to my camera. "I'll be your guide today," said the blonde woman. "My name is Ellie. Today we're going to be delving into the ancient mysteries of Egypt and the pharaoh Tat-Kera II. She emphasized the wrong syllable in his name. "I also want to announce we have someone special with us today, film star Willem Dafoe, who you might remember as Ryuk from the live-action Death Note movie." So, okay, I don't mind admitting that my heart skipped a beat when I saw Willem Dafoe in line with me. I've been hot for him ever since Clear and Present Danger. I'd brought a water bottle to keep hydrated, but this was a thirst no water bottle could quench. But when I saw him sheepishly wave big sunglasses over his eyes, I could tell that he clearly wanted to be left alone. Dude was just trying to enjoy his vacation. "Don't be like Ellie," I whispered to myself. We started to move inside the entrance to the pyramid as Ellie started rattling off the dates on Tat-Kera II. He wasn't an especially important pharaoh, but his pyramid was one of the better preserved ones from this period and in this region. He was also one of many pharaohs to be deposed, in this case by his nephew Akhmenhotep, over his open worship of the serpent god Apep. I honestly just hated listening to her talk. She seemed so, I don't know, fake. She did that annoying thing some girls do where they try to sound like they're from California, but they're really not. But it was cool being in a pyramid. The stonework was impressive, even in a state of disrepair, although the deeper in we moved, the greater the darkness became. A pyramid has no windows, and we were more and more reliant on our flashlights. "Hey, what kind of camera is that?" I turned around to see who had spoken. Big zoom-in vertigo shot on my shocked expression. It was Willem Dafoe, his sunglasses removed in the darkness of the pyramid, his hot, leathery face unobscured. Willem Dafoe was talking to me, and he wanted to know about my camera. O-M-G. "Oh," I said, nervously brushing a strand of hair out of my eyes. "It's a Canon XA11. Yeah, I thought it looked like what do you call them, prosumer model. You making a movie here?" "Yeah," I said. "Well, not necessarily here. I'm scouting locations for a documentary I'm working on." "Very cool," said Willem Dafoe. "You know, I'm something of a movie guy myself. So, what's your documentary about?" "Tourism in Egypt, mainly," I said. "Like how the legacy of ancient Egypt has attracted foreign interest over the years and how that has hurt and helped the Egyptian people. So modern tourism, but also like Egyptology in the 19th and 20th centuries." Dafoe smiled. "I nearly fell in." "So maybe you can answer this question. It's been bugging me for a while now. That story about Napoleon's soldiers shooting off the Sphinx's nose, is that true? I shook my head. We're pretty sure that was just basic weathering. He chuckled. I knew it was too dramatic to be true. Oh well. The other thing we're researching, I said, perhaps a little too desperate for this conversation to continue, is the whole Pharaoh's curse myth. Okay, said Willem Dafoe. Like with, what was his name, Lord Carnarvon and King Tut's tomb. Exactly, I said. That's the best known case. But there's also the Thomas Brantford expedition, which disappeared without a trace in 1923. I haven't heard of them, said Willem Dafoe. His tone made it sound like he wanted me to continue, so I did. So Thomas Brantford was a very well-known Egyptologist at the time, and a prominent socialite. I think he even dated Mary Pickford for a little while. And he was down here investigating ancient mystery cults when he disappeared. Him and his research partner, whose name was Abdul Ahmed Rahim, I believe. Weird, said Willem Dafoe. What do you think happened? If I had to guess, I said, I'd say the most likely answer is that they were killed by bandits or just got caught in a sandstorm or something. But at the time, well, people were a little bit enthusiastic to call every mishap in Egypt the result of an ancient curse. You don't think it was a curse? Willem Dafoe asked, a big smile on his face. Too dramatic to be true, I said back to him, and he laughed. But I don't know, maybe we'll find out a bit more while making this documentary. I'd like to see it when it's done, said Dafoe. This sounds really interesting. Can I give you my contact information after this? Oh, and I just realized, you never told me your name. I practically died right then and there. It's Bridget. Hi, Bridget. Nice to meet you. We continued through the corridors of the pyramid, past where the canopic jars would have been, until Ellie brought us to a big stone archway. Through it was a strange altar, carved with snake motifs. This was the sacrificial altar of Apep, she explained. Although human sacrifice wasn't widely practiced in Egypt as it was in some other, more primitive places, Willem Dafoe made an annoyed face at that, the reign of Tat-Kira II was an exception. Once every decade, 2 people would be sacrificed to Apep the night serpent. One would be a person who was widely known, usually a famous artist, priest, or dignitary. The other would be a nobody, a peasant. And this is where it was done. She waved a hand towards the altar. Could I get 2 volunteers, please? Mr. Dafoe, why don't you come up? And you. She said this last word to me, with an expression like I was something she found under her shoe. Willem Dafoe grinned sheepishly again, clearly uncomfortable. But he walked up to her. I followed. Will you each stand next to the altar, please? We walked towards it, but the moment we stepped under the arch, something strange happened. The snake sculptures on the altar suddenly seemed to move, and their eyes lit up with an eerie green glow. Suddenly, I couldn't move, frozen in place by that strange light. That's better, said Ellie. The rest of you, she said to the tour group, once this light goes away, you won't remember a thing. You won't remember that these 2 were ever here, and you will not miss them. As for you 2, she said to me and Willem Dafoe, you are both to be honored in the greatest terms possible. You'll be lowered into the caverns of night where the angels of Apep await. Oh, Apep, continued the tour guide, ever since I came to Egypt to find myself during gap year, your worship has brought meaning to my life. Slow zoom in on my face. Expression. Frozen. Your cult has instructed me, and I'm honored to be the torchbearer for your legacy today. Your sacrificial rituals will be observed today, just as they were in ages past. Your angels will be fed, the darkness shall be fed, the world of flesh will miss a well-known artist, and will not miss a nobody. I could hear a grinding sound, like a lever being pulled, and I realized the tiles I was standing on were part of a platform which was lowering into the ground below me. I tried to move, to run away, even to turn my head and see what was happening, but the green eyes of the snake statues held me frozen as I descended into the darkness, until the only light was from those green eyes and from the flashlights of the people above us. Eventually a second sound, more grinding, like stone on stone, became audible, and even the light from above was blocked out. A trap door was sliding out from the side, sealing us below. When I finally regained control of my limbs, the green light was finally dimming. "Bridget, are you okay?" asked a reassuring, gravelly voice. I was sealed under an ancient Egyptian pyramid with Willem Dafoe. "I'm scared, Willem," I stammered. "It's okay," he said. "I've been in worse situations." "You have?" I said. "Sure. One time I was trapped in a tent with John Lurie, and we both died of starvation, but it turned out okay. And another time I was stuck in the lighthouse with Robert Pattinson, and we nearly kissed. And, well, I don't want to spoil how that turned out in case the girl reading this hasn't seen that one yet. But I'll say that was a bad time, but I'm still here. We'll survive this." He took my hand in his big leathery mitts, and I felt reassured. I really did. We turned the flashlight functions on our phones to see where we were. It didn't look like masonry work or like part of a building, but more like a natural cave. "Look," said Willem, pointing to a tunnel leading further out. "This has to lead somewhere. Could lead to outside." "You think so? It's worth checking. Here, you turn your light off and conserve the battery. We don't know how long they'll need to last." I did, and we made our way through the tunnel. It was narrow and cramped, but I knew that as long as Willem Dafoe was with me, things would be okay. We came eventually to a fork in the tunnel. "What do you think, Bridget? Left or right?" I remembered an old trick to solving mazes, that if you go left every time, eventually you'll get out of it, so I said left. I guess the trick would also work if you went right every time, but left is how I learned it. "Left it is," he said, holding his phone high for light. We kept moving that way, and the tunnel seemed to be moving upward, so we were hopeful. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the rock. "This looks like a quarry or something. See how the stone is broken here." I looked closer into the island of bluish smartphone light and could see what he meant. It wasn't masonry, but it looked like the stone had been shaped by deliberate hands, with pickaxes maybe, or chisels. "Was this an old mine shaft?" I asked. "Maybe," he said, "although—" He looked closer at a specific break in the rock where a piece might have flaked off. "I can't figure out the angle on this. You'd have to swing from this side," he said, indicating further down the tunnel. "Okay," I said. "Maybe they dug it from somewhere further out and tunneled down into the tunnel. It seems to be getting shallower this way. Maybe there's a mine entrance somewhere in the hills?" Willem nodded. "Maybe." But as we continued, the tunnel plunged sharply downward. The mysterious evidence of stonework continued, however, and it was very clear that this was no longer a natural cave, but a shaft that had been dug with deliberate purpose, and a tunnel floor that had been smoothed with the passage of many, many feet over many, many years. After almost an hour of walking, it became clear that the tunnel was not going to turn back upward any time soon. We were so far below the surface, I was starting to get a headache from the pressure difference. Suddenly, Willem stopped walking, holding his hand up for me to stop as well. He pointed quietly to an object on the edge of the phone's light. It was a human skeleton. Slowly, quietly, we tiptoed towards it, finding a second skeleton next to it. Both of them had what looked like metal spears through their skulls, extending up from the floor. Both of the spears were smeared with what looked like very old, very desiccated feces. Between them were some tools that looked rusted, disused, but certainly not ancient. A trowel, a few metal clasps, and what might have been the remains of a leather haversack. "I think we may have found Thomas Branford and Abdul Ahmed Rahim," he whispered. "Shit," I replied. "Didn't that crazy lady back there say the sacrifices were always one well-known person, and one person nobody knew about? That describes these two guys to a T." "The rare case of the dramatic story being true," Willem joked grimly. "Look at these spikes. I wonder if this was part of a trap once? Yeah, this looks like the remains of a tripwire. So they were walking, probably with a lot less light than we have, and they broke this wire, and the spikes just shot up from the floor. Look at these bones, I said. They'd all chewed up. Willem said nothing, but I could see his fear on his face. The skeletons were marked with what looked like tooth marks. Willem, I said, I don't think we're alone down here. Didn't she say something about the angels of Apep? Willem nodded. He reached for the trowel, gripping it like a hatchet, and he handed me a rusty pickaxe. Closest thing to weapons we've got, I guess. We kept walking, and once again Willem gestured for me to stop. What is it? Look at that, he said, pointing to an object illuminated by his phone. It was a tripwire, still taut. After we carefully stepped over it, the tunnel dropped even more steeply, and the number of bones became more and more plentiful. Willem, can we turn back and try going the other way at the fork? I said. But the chisel work, he said. This has to be the way out. They were digging from this direction, so it has to turn back up eventually. What if they weren't digging down? What if they were digging up from beneath? Once again, he didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He turned around, and we started walking back to the fork, and he gripped the trowel a little tighter. But before long, we began to hear a noise coming from somewhere behind us. At first, it was a skittering sound like rats moving over the stone, but it grew steadily louder, despite our quickened pace. We were using the light from my phone now, and it occurred to me that if there were something behind us, we'd want to see it coming. I turned my phone around, facing the way we had come, just in time to hear a squeal of pain and briefly glimpse a pale form darting back into the shadows. What was that? Asked Willem. I don't know. I didn't see it clearly, I said. But I don't think it likes the light. Willem nodded. Makes sense. It must be blinding to these things, whatever they are. For a few minutes, we walked ahead like that. The angels of Apep, whatever they were, no longer just a possibility. We could hear them shuffling and shambling just past the edge of the light, following us as close as they dared. But they were getting louder and bolder. Finally, one of them ventured into the light. I didn't want to look, didn't want to see it, but I knew any chance we had of surviving depended on this. I looked, and immediately wished I hadn't. It took a second to adjust to the light before leaping right at us, sucker-like mouth wide open and teeth bared. Willem swung his trowel just at the right moment, catching it in the jaw, and the thing tumbled to the ground, but any moment of relief was cut short, as more and more of the things, emboldened, now poured haphazardly into the light after us. Run, said Willem. I don't know if I've ever ran as fast as I did that day in the tunnel. If we could have seen further ahead of us, we probably would have run faster. But these things behind us knew these tunnels like the backs of their diseased hands, and they were fast too, and they kept pace with us. And we were both running out of breath. Finally, we came to a narrow squeeze in the tunnel. I'm going to hold them off here, said Willem. They can't come at me all at once. You go on ahead. Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings started playing. I'm not leaving you, Willem, I said. He smiled at me, touched my shoulder. All right then, he said. If I die here, I die next to an independent filmmaker. I can think of no higher honor. You guys make it all possible. We stood, shoulder to shoulder, in that narrow tunnel. At least none of the little mutants could get behind us. Just as the first of them entered our sight, I turned up the light on my phone as high as it would go, disorienting them slightly, and buying Willem time to get the first strike in, bashing a mucousy skull in with his trowel. I swung my pickaxe, catching one of them in the rib cage, but a second was already on me, and I just barely managed to knock it aside with my backswing, the pickaxe skewering it through the malformed chin. Now I had another problem. My weapon was lodged in the creature, and I couldn't free it to deal with the next one. It caught me off guard, clamping a lamprey-like mouth onto my arm. I could feel my blood draining into its sickly body for a second, and almost retched with disgust at the sensation before Willem came to my aid, jabbing his trowel sharply into the thing's temple and knocking it off me, leaving a ragged and painful wound. But at least I was free. He covered me, moving his trowel like an expert knife fighter, buying me time to free my pickaxe. I propped my boot against the thing's squishy head, pulling at the pickaxe with all my might until it finally came loose, and I swung again and again. There were close to a dozen of the things, but they were unarmed, save for their broken knife-like fingernails and horrible fanged mouths. Our weapons gave us that extra bit of reach, which, combined with our strategic positioning, we were able to hold them at bay. The bodies of their dead became an impediment to them, and before long they started to falter, until the last few of them, squealing, fled back down the tunnel into the darkness. So, that's the angels of Apep, breathed Willem. I was about to make a witticism when another voice interrupted us. No, those were just a few of the minor priests. The angels are on their way. I spun around to see Ellie, the tour guide, in the tunnel ahead of us. You! I shouted. She smirked and ran. Willem and I tried to run after her, but the melee had exhausted us, and she outpaced us easily. Those were priests, he gasped. I think they looked like they used to be human, didn't they? He shuddered. Just then, we heard a loud snapping sound echo through the tunnel. It was a few minutes before we came to the source of it. Ellie, in her haste, had sprung a tripwire and was now impaled on another spike trap. Like the last one we saw, it had been smeared with feces, some of which had gotten on her face. She's dead, said Willem, checking her pulse. Painful way to die, I murmured. I guess Apep gets a sacrifice after all, he said. I really don't want to stay and find out what else is down here, so do you want to keep moving? We took the other turn at the fork. Before long, we saw dwindling daylight at the end of the tunnel, emerging out of a cliff and into the evening air. I could see the parked tour buses in the distance. We made it, I said. Willem breathed a sigh of relief. We made it, he agreed. I feel like your documentary is going to be a pretty wild movie at this point. Yeah, I guess so. You're looking for a narrator, he offered. I nearly died. A.N. Hey everyone, hope you like this story. Please rate and review. And also, you know how some TV shows are like, next time on, and then show you a few clips of the next episode? Well, here is a free sneak peek at my next story, Starving in the Belly of a Whale with Sir Ian McKellen. You know, said Sir Ian, hanging from a piece of baleen and trying not to fall into the stomach acid, I played director James Whale in Gods and Monsters. I still haven't seen that, I said. Bride of Frankenstein is great, though. Deaf, said Sir Ian. Mutant Museum would like to thank all of its generous sponsors, particularly Break System BSE, for their patronage. Please consider coming on as a donor if you're not already. We are just a little over $20 away from our goal of a remake of My Inner Life, which I know is something that a lot of people are excited for and something I would love to do. Like I said, we're only about $20 away from that, but if you can't, if you don't have the money to spare, because I know things have been difficult, please at least like, comment, and smash that subscribe button.